Hello, welcome to the stream. Hello, hello. I think we're live. All's good. Uh, welcome. So, in today's stream, I'll be diving into some. Oh boy, my mind went blank. Into some gesture drawing. And basically, I haven't drawn for about 2 weeks, so I want to jump back into gesture drawing, and just get back into the swing of things. See how much has kind of slipped my mind. A new webcam? Yeah, it's a new camera that I got for recording some videos. I'm going to be, my brother and I will be recording the graduation ceremony for Animation Mentor, and doing some other recordings while we're down at the CTN convention this year. So, got a new camera, which makes a great webcam too, which is awesome. So this week is going to be so we will be able to watch here at home. I don't know if it's going to be live, the graduation, but at least maybe the party afterwards will be what's the word I'm looking for? Not a live stream, but you'll be able to see like snippets of it afterwards for those who weren't able to make it. But my brother and I figured since we go down there every year, we should record it anyway, just in case people don't get to see it. And at least the alumni themselves would be able to get a copy, hopefully. So that's kind of the goal here with this new camera. Hopefully it'll work. And we'll see. And thank you, Sir Wade FX, for hosting. I really appreciate that. For anyone who doesn't know, Sir Wade FX is an awesome guy, an AM alumni. He has a YouTube channel. Definitely check him out. If ever you're interested in learning all sorts of different things about animation, his channel is definitely worth following and checking out. If you just do a Google search for Sir Wade, and actually, let me give you guys the link to it. Just because it is worth it. I watch all of them. Yes, he is awesome. I remember when he was going through AM as a student. He was always super helpful. Always there to help students. And then he graduated, went to DreamWorks. And now he's got his own YouTube channel, which is absolutely fantastic. There's the link for anyone who doesn't know of the channel or hasn't checked it out yet. Definitely recommend it. His one with the AM and alumni at Sony is the best. Yeah, it's so weird to see that one because I know so many of them, and it's like, oh wow, they're not in front of a webcam now. They're actually in front of a nice, really cool camera at a studio. It's not just their room anymore or just in front of a laptop. It's so cool to see. And they're all doing such awesome work, especially Sony. Oh boy, they're doing some cool stuff lately. So yeah, definitely check out Sir Wade if you haven't before, for anyone who hasn't seen him. So with that, let's dive into the gesture drawings. Now, as usual, if you do have questions about animation, questions about drawing, questions about anything really, feel free to ask at any time. I love answering questions. That's really what this channel is here for, is to help you guys and kind of give me an excuse to animate and draw while helping people if I can. Let's see. Unfortunately, they were all graduating the term I started, but I know who they are because they're legends. Yes. That group of people going through AM were they were really good. It was a close-knit group that helped each other out, and they were all commenting on each other. Just really, they stuck together and helped each other out right through the whole program. Really, really good stuff came from that group, and this group as well that's coming through here as well, which you're a part of, Daniel. This really close-knit community that's really just pushing each other along. It's been a while since I've seen a community like quite that involved in helping each other out, which is amazing to see that you guys are pushing yourselves to do that. So bonus on that. Let's see. So let's see. With that out of the way, let's start drawing. And again, as usual, if you do have questions, feel free to ask. I love questions. I really, really do. And Casey Annam, thank you so much for the host as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So let's see. Let's jump here to my desktop. Hopefully my camera's not too far. I haven't set it up quite right yet. It's like it's a little zoomed out, which I like, but then you get the Majora's Mask, which is a little creepy to look at, right in the center there, hovering over my head. I might have to move that around just because it kind of looks creepy. The eyes glow on that one too. If I turned it on, that would look really weird and creepy. So I'm going to be doing some gesture drawing here today. Now, if you do want to follow along, like Daniel, you had mentioned you were going to draw along, feel free to do so. I don't know if my webcam is going to be in the way for certain poses, but hopefully you'll be able to see the poses well enough here. So definitely feel free to follow along, and if you'd like me to look at your work afterwards, feel free to upload it, and I'd love to give some comments and notes for you guys. Keep in mind, I'm still learning how to draw. This is still pretty new to me. I've been doing it for a few months now, but I'm always learning. I'm still trying to refine myself here. So these are not the notes of a master. These would be the notes of a student who's trying to figure out what he's doing. But hopefully they would be helpful either way. So let's jump into this. So let's see. Let's hit get drawing. I'm going to be doing a 2-hour session here on lineofaction.com. So that'll be a few 30-second poses, minute poses, 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute, and then one last 50-minute pose. So let's jump right into that. And the first one we get is this really interesting ninja pose. Now I have to get my speed back up here. I haven't been able to draw for the last 2 or 3 weeks now. I think it's been something like that. So I am insanely rusty. I tried to do a few test drawings before the actual stream, and boy oh boy was I barely making them. Barely getting the 30-second drawings in time. It's amazing what a few weeks will do without practice. Now luckily I haven't forgotten everything, so it's not like I'm starting back at 0. But it definitely feels slower than the last time I remember doing this. The last time I was doing the gesture drawings, I kind of felt like, hey, I'm finally getting a good handle on this. And really getting the speed down, especially for the 30-second drawings. Now it's kind of, really have to concentrate on not falling behind. The other thing I noticed with my my little test sketches was that the issue that I used to have with drawing tiny little heads has come back. So my head proportions are getting small again for some reason. Something that I'm gonna have to try and focus on fixing during this stream here. So let's get that here. Okay. So for anyone who hasn't seen the streams recently or who wasn't here in the stream yesterday, which was technically, I guess, the first true Pratt Bros stream, because my brother was actually with me in the stream. He actually had time, and we were able to host together for a change, which is technically how the stream was supposed to be right from the start, but his work schedule is super hectic. And if you haven't checked it out, it is recorded, so you can take a look at it if you'd like. We ended up I was going to do a constraint demo for Maya, and he was going to do some drawing tests, but we ended up answering questions for the whole thing. And then a bunch of students surprised us with an amazing video, which Daniel, you were a part of, I believe. So thank you so much for that. It was amazing. If you want to see our reactions live, I forget, it's like 15 minutes into the video, the recording, if you want to check that out, Daniel. But yeah, it was a fun stream yesterday, getting to do it, the two of us together. The reactions were the best. I'm just sad that my camera died halfway through. It was such a shame. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. I found out that the outlet that I had the camera plugged into wasn't actually working, so it wasn't charging or keeping power at all. Luckily, I had a second battery, but hopefully today it's not going to happen. I switched outlets and double checked at the start of this before the stream that it was actually charging. So hopefully we won't run into that again. But yeah, to everyone who worked on that video, thank you so much. That video alone was amazing, and then the whole Disney thing on top of that is just, there's no words to describe how awesome all of that was and how much it means to us. But I totally got sidetracked on my own topic. I was gonna bring something up about gesture drawing, and I totally spaced on my own topic. I was just gonna say that in the video or the stream yesterday, with my brother and I, we were both kind of doing some gesture drawing challenges, and one interesting thing that we found was that we kind of approached gesture drawing differently. He approaches it in a very not linear, but he draws the lines of the body, the lines of the character. So drawing not so much the shape or the underlying form, but the, how to phrase it, the dynamic lines of the character. And then he uses those lines, once he has those in, to then influence the form. Whereas when I draw, I tend to draw form first. Form and kind of a more fluid. Like you can see my lines are very flowy, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. And I tend to focus more on that kind of structure and flow before figuring out the lines of the character. So we kind of approach it in two different ways, and then kind of, I don't want to say reach the same conclusion, but then fill in what we're missing afterwards. And it's his method is one I really want to try out someday, because I think it might help me kind of fix some of the problems that I run into, specifically in regards to proportions and keeping an eye on well, how one object or one shape might relate to another. One problem I have is if I'm not really careful and if I stop paying attention, my pose, nothing will line up properly anymore. I will have just random shapes coming in, and sure, I'm gonna have form, but without the underlying structure and the underlying balance of the pose, that won't matter much at all, because a bunch of forms overlapping each other with no proportions is just going to be very odd to look at. So it's definitely something I want to focus on a little bit more in the future. And I'm going to try to implement it a little bit as I go in today, but I do kind of need to practice it on my own first, because I'm still not quite sure how to mentally approach it. It's something that it makes sense when he was showing it to me, but then as I try to draw it myself, it's like, I'm not sure if I'm getting it. But we'll see. Okay, so make sure my lines or my objects are lining up here. One thing that's not lining up is this leg here. It needs to be this way a little bit more. So you can see here, if I watch that line of the leg there, I overdrew it there. Let me undo that. It's a little bit more this way. Kind of that, like so. That'll keep him in balance more. The way I had drawn the leg, he was going to throw himself out of balance right away. Okay, that's better. And then that. Just watching my angles here. Making sure my negative space, this space right in here, it kind of matches with the other one. If ever you're trying to analyze your pose, looking at the negative space is a huge help. And looking at the lines of the clothing can also be helpful, especially with the form of the body. Because you'll notice that the pants, for example, you can see them rounding around his body here on the side, but then on the front it's pretty flat. It's not just a circle, it's more of a shape like that going around the body. Okay, so let's see here. It's tilted. Now we do have 5 minutes on this one. I'm going to slow things down a little bit in terms of getting the initial pose right out there, and really try to start focusing more on watching the relationship between everything. So we've got that. Stomach comes in. Hip comes out. Okay, let's get those shoulders in there. We've got the actual why can't I think of the word now? The shoulder muscles. The starts with a D. Deltoids? No, that's not. The man, why? See, 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and I've already forgotten so much. Or at least it doesn't come naturally. Hello, Blue Gel, how's it going? Only one of me today, unfortunately. My brother couldn't make it. Got busy with another project he's doing. Yeah, I so enjoyed doing that last stream with him. That was the first time we actually had time to do them together. Even though the channel is called Pratt Bros, and that was the original intent. So I don't have his guidance as I'm trying to draw now. Let's see. But let's see, what was I talking about? I forget. I'm so absent-minded. It's terrible. Okay, we've got that. Let's get the line of the head there. Okay. I hope he gets to stream with you more often. So do I. It was a lot of fun. I like streaming just like myself. It's a lot of fun, but having someone to kind of banter with and have horrible jokes made makes it much more fun, much more entertaining in general. You two seem to be in unison. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect because it was our first time streaming like that. I was kind of thinking, okay, we might do pretty well and like be really in sync. Like we're twins, so okay, everything's gonna be really just in time. We're gonna know what each other is thinking, and it's gonna be great in that sense. And then we started it, and it was just this awesome hodgepodge of jokes that one wasn't expecting, and we were just on totally different pages for a lot of things, but I loved it because of that. It made it so much more interesting. It was so much fun. I'll definitely ask him if he can make time in his schedule, or see if he can reschedule some things to jump in at least once a week. That would be cool. Okay. See, this hand lines up right about there. Okay, good. My lines are, or my things are lining up pretty well. One thing that's not lining up is the hip here. You can see that's way too far out here. I need to make that chest a little bit thicker here. I made the chest just a little too thin, which is an issue I tend to do. That's something I'm aware of with my drawings, is I tend to draw it very, what's the right word, top or bottom heavy, so everything kind of grows outwards from the top. So I'll draw the head tiny, and then by the time I get to the feet, they're just huge, which makes a lot of my drawings very awkward looking, disproportionate and out of balance. So that's definitely something I need to pay attention to. Neck is there. Got the body. Now this is a 10-minute drawing, so this I can definitely try to focus more on my proportions. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of measuring out head lengths to see where things line up. And I'm doing this by eye. Ideally, you want to measure that with a pencil. Now, I could do that technically, actually. With my tablet that I have, I can just hold it up to the drawing and compare. So, using my pen like so. But I'm going to try one version like this where I'm not measuring. I'm measuring, but I'm not doing it with actual physical measurements. And then one where I actually compare. I don't even know how to do a body or face, for that matter. I'm still learning how to do faces. That's something that vexes me still. But I'll get there eventually. But yeah, if you do have questions, if you do want to learn how to draw, definitely feel free to ask. That's really the goal of this channel, is to help anyone who wants to learn how to draw, or wants to learn how to animate. If you have questions, feel free to ask, because I'm more than happy to help out. Now with drawing, it'll be limited in what I can help with because I'm still learning that, but if it's in relation to animation, feel free to ask anything you want. That I can definitely help with, or at least point in the right direction if that's what you need. And that goes for everyone. Any questions you have, feel free to ask. Okay. So, got the angle there, and let's see. So at this point, I've got the basic shape in here, but let's really double check my proportions throughout this. So by checking proportions, you can do this in a lot of ways. You can do it by measuring things out, like I was talking about before. You can look at negative space as well. So for example, the shape that is created between the arm and the hand here. Well, I could draw that shape out, and it kind of creates something like that. So I know that the hand has to be at least on the outside here. Now, by looking at those negative shapes, that can really help influence my positioning and make sure that I'm not overdrawing areas or drawing things too closely. You can also look at relationships between things. So draw or imagine lines between your objects. So if I go straight down from the elbow, that kind of reaches right to the top of the butt right there, which you can see I am totally off from. So I don't usually erase things, but I'm going to do this in this case just to kind of, and actually here, let me show another way I actually prefer erasing. Instead of just erasing everything completely, I'll just use a very soft eraser and just kind of fade it out like so. That way I can still see what I had before. But now let's fix what I had. So that arm needs to line up basically right there. So we've got that. We're creating this very round negative space there. Let's kind of focus on the angle of the body here. The ribs come in right there. And you can even look at the flow. You can see it on the shine of this suit that this character is wearing. How it goes from the ribs down and then across the leg. So let's kind of clean that up there. Leg comes up, and actually, again, make sure I'm paying attention to my lines and how things line up here. So from the head down, that kind of creates the start of the leg here. Then we get the back right there. And then the lower leg attaches into there. So you can see it's not much of a change, and I kind of over erased the pose that I had underneath because I was supposed to use it as kind of a guide to show the difference. but now we can't even see it. Oh, and thank you. I've still got a lot to learn, but compared to where I started, I've made quite a bit of progress, and that's a big thanks to my brother who gives me a lot of tips whenever he gets a chance. So kind of coming in through there. The head's just a little small here. That's still something I struggle with, is that head size. Make sure I get that shoulder in there. Okay. And let's actually put the line of the body here. Okay. Now we've got the other leg here, which just kind of comes out. We get the knee, and then comes back in here. So something like that. Now, this is the basic form. We've got about 2 minutes left. At this point, we can start to really refine the actual shapes. And let me actually get this foot in here. And we can do this in a lot of different ways. One of the ways I like to do it is I'll just take my soft eraser and just kind of fade everything out, and then start actually refining things. So for example, if we've got the rib cage here, we'll just try to do the rib cage in about 2 minutes here. The rib cage is actually very small in the body. Let's get the angle here. So we've got that angle for the rib cage in the front here. Get those ribs in there. And from the rib cage, for the arms, you get the actual shoulder muscles that wrap around and over top here. And it helps create the actual shape of the arm. Without these, all you're gonna have is arms sticking out of a body like that. That doesn't really work. Instead, you get this kind of form that sits on top of the arm, or sorry, on top of the ribs, and then the arms sit within that. And that gives you the shoulders of your character. That makes them actually look like they have mass to them. So something like that. And then the arms sit within that, down here. And then from the shoulders, you also get the lat muscles, which are the back muscles. Again, instead of just a round shape here, technically it's more egg-shaped, you get the lat muscles coming off the sides there. And actually, this is going to be a good one to kind of show that. So let's do this one now. And this one, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to actual proportions. So we've got one head length here. And actually, this is a good time to show a cool tool that I like to use in Clip Studio here. If you have Clip Studio, this is a free brush you can download. Which is I don't even know the name, it's in Japanese. But with this, I can just set my brush size to about the size of my head height here. And then let's hold down Shift, click and drag, and let's move down a little bit. I'll go straight down, and there you go. I now have a measurement tool. And with this, I've got my height for all sorts of different things. Now, usually for a character, for example, it's about 7.5 to 8 heads tall. But in this case, I'm just going to measure using my pencil here. And from the head height down, we get one head height goes from there down to about the tutu here. So knowing that, I know that the tutu will start right about here. Krita is an awesome tool. I use Krita for animation mostly, but it might have a brush that's similar. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at their brushes, although they do have a great variety of brushes. Yeah, I can understand that feeling. I've only been able to get Clip Studio recently. Well, I think it was pretty much for these streams actually. Yeah, I got it just before I started streaming. It was the first time I could actually afford it properly, because before that it was just out of my price range. I used to use Paint Tool Sai before that, which was a great tool, but it didn't get updated very often, which made it a little bit of a pain. So at the no wait, I'm measuring things wrong here. So from the head, that's 1, and then at the end of 2, let me redo this here. For some reason my measurements, I totally got messed up on them. So arm goes there. So 1 head height. Now, if you do find that you get confused, like I do a lot of the time when you're drawing on something like this, for me it kind of gets confusing. You can use something called Epic Pen if you're on Windows. And what this allows you to do is just draw directly on the screen. So now I can just go 1 and then measure it out, just kind of interactively, like so. So we've got 1, 2, 3 approximately. So with this, let's try that again. So 1, you get the belt line, or right at the tutu like I'd mentioned before, top of the tutu. And then from there, 3 gets like right at the pelvis area. So just about here. So let's see, 1, 2, 3 should be right about there. Okay. The knee lines up with the eyes. So I can draw a line straight down there, and then like so. And then here I can just watch my negative space, make sure I'm creating that very distinct shape right there. Other leg comes down, passes, and then down. So there we go. Now you'll notice that my body is very thin right here compared to hers. That's because I haven't drawn the lats in yet, the back muscles. I personally, the way I like to draw is I keep the rib cage very kind of small, and then once I have the other forms, then I can start building in the rest of the forms here, like the lats coming up like so. And Black Unigriffin, that is an awesome username, first of all. But thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate that. Let's see, so arm comes down here. The hand lines up right there if we go to the fingertips. So it's a lot of drawing, especially when you're first getting started and you're having trouble getting that initial pose and the initial shapes going in there. A lot of it is just analyzing and looking at the differences in shapes. differences in shapes and how they relate to each other. So here we've got the hat. I'm gonna do that super quick. Now you'll notice that my shapes are not good right here. And the reason for this is gesture drawing, what I'm doing right now. This is not the final drawing. This is just capturing the initial shape of things. Trying to capture the feeling of motion in the drawing first. Once I've got that in, that's when I can start to really refine things and build in the musculature, build in all the actual details. Right now, I really do not care about details. If anything, they will just be a hindrance to me. So, really not focusing on that kind of stuff just yet. Now the neck comes down here. Okay. So, with that, we've got close to the right proportions. Let's put that in here. The knee comes in there. And then up. So, I try to draw through objects. So, for example, the lower leg, I'm envisioning the whole lower leg coming up here, and then the whole upper leg here coming through that. They're two separate forms that overlap each other. Same thing here. Instead of just trying to draw the outline of the hips, I'm envisioning got the one leg here that comes down and then across the upper leg, and then the lower leg comes up here. And it'll look really messy right now, but then I can just tone it down. And let's clean it up a little bit. So first start with the head. Actually, pay attention to the jawline, where the eyes are. Here. And keep it simple right now. Now we go into the neck, shoulder, wraps around the arm like so. Got the lats coming down there. Let's see, this arm. We get the actual armpit area here, which the armpit, if ever you have trouble figuring out how that works, it really is just a matter of getting the overlapping shapes of the arm and shoulder working, and then it'll kind of all fix itself. So let me clear out my drawings on this, and oops, the tablet's not working. There you go. Haha. Let's do a different pose here. Maybe that one will be good. The other pose tends to have, or that set of pictures I find has a very interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? Perspective to it. The lens they used for the camera has a lot of distortion, which is nice as practice in terms of really pushing your eye on getting perspective. But if you're just learning initially, it can really throw things off and give you a false sense of how the body is structured. So the head lines up with the foot approximately. right at the ankle here, so the foot would be right about there. Shoulder. You can really see it on him, how you get this shape of the deltoid here. The delts coming up and wrapping through. The arm sits in there, and actually this is perfect for what we were talking about, the armpit. So the arm comes in here and holds onto the shoe. But instead of trying to figure out, okay, how does this armpit work? I can just create this kind of girdle here for the delts. It kind of wraps around. The arm sits in here. And then from there, you then have the lats, which come down below here, and the ribs right there. Now this brush is a little thick to show all this detail here, but you can see how that creates the feeling of the armpit versus just an arm that sits against the body. So for example, if I just did a simple shape there and then just stuck an arm on there like that, well, that's just an arm sitting on a character, and oftentimes you'll get arms that look like this, where they just stick out of a character in a very weird way. It is very flat, and really, as long as you think of those shapes, the deltoid coming up and wrapping around the arm, which is just a cylinder. So you've got the deltoid wrapping up over top of that and behind, and then you've got the lats behind there to kind of wrap around, and then the pecs as well from the front. Suddenly you've got an armpit, and the arm actually feels like it's attached to the body instead of just being an extension that just sticks out in a weird way. So here we can see the same thing. There's the deltoid and pec. So this line right here, this muscle, that's the pectoral muscle actually, stretching from the attachment here on the chest and then upwards into the arm right there. And then you get the deltoid, which is kind of hidden by his hair, wrapping around. A little bit of the lat right back here. The arm coming in. So you got the arm, and there's you have the bicep, tricep, and brachioradialis muscle in the arm right there. So bicep, tricep, brachioradialis right down here. Oh no, wait, sorry, not the brachioradialis. The brachial muscle. Brachioradialis is in the arm. But we get that. Really push that line of the ribs here. Now you can see I'm starting to add a lot of anatomy in here. That is actually bad in terms of gesture drawing. That is something you do not want to start doing until afterwards, because I don't have the whole gesture in here first. I'm defeating the purpose of this exercise by adding a bunch of anatomy to the drawing too early. So we've got the leg here. Now, when you are studying gesture drawing and specifically learning anatomy, don't do gesture drawings like this where you're working on clothed figures. You want to make sure that you're doing gesture drawings with nude figures, and that can seem uncomfortable, especially if you're new to art, but that is what's going to get you learning much quicker, and just in general advancing in many more ways. And basically the reason being is clothes get in the way. So for example here, where's his knee? In the lower leg is kind of easy. You can see it's right where that line goes, like so we can see that indent right there. But what about the other one? Where exactly is his knee? Hard to tell. Usually the knee is about halfway. Okay, well, where is, like, how does the musculature or the anatomy work right here in the hips? How do the legs attach into the hips here? That is a very important piece of anatomy that we are not seeing here. So when doing gesture drawing, especially if you're focusing on anatomy, don't do it like I'm doing here. Now, the reason I'm doing it like this is because if I did nude figure drawing on Twitch, I would probably be kicked off of Twitch. But it is good practice to do anyway. So I'm just going to focus more on the clothes and the kind of shape of the clothing as well, which is also good practice. Don't discount clothes figures for like, oh, it's not as good. No, you can get really good practice learning how drapery works and how folds work by doing this. So both have their pros and cons. It really just depends on what you're focusing on, what you're aiming to learn. So got this nice angle here. Push that. There we go. Get the angle of the head in there. Okay. Make that a little bit thicker. The chest is a little thin right now, the way I drew it. I'd rather know less about the unclothed part of anatomy. Also, this type is great for me. Yeah, for some people, it's more fun drawing clothing too. I know some people where their passion is just drawing clothes, which, like, doing this kind of studying is really great. And man, are they good at it. There's a few people I know where it's just they draw clothes and they could be just fashion designers. They do it so well and it always looks so cool. That is something I would love to kind of practice a little bit more. For me, when it comes to clothing, I draw the basic lines and that's about it. Now, one thing I'm noticing is something's off with my drawing. And the way I can tell is look at the negative space right in here. It's not right. I'm missing something right down here. The leg should be a little bit more here. That should be the angle of the leg. I misdrew that angle here. So what I can do is just kind of reshape it in here. And then okay, this is really amazing though. I feel like gesture drawing has started to click for me. Nice. Yeah, it takes a while to click, but once it does, it's so much more fun. I used to do gesture drawing years ago and I never quite got into it, and it was just this chore. This, like, ugh, why am I even doing this? It's so boring. I want to draw fun stuff. But then when I started doing these streams and really trying to apply myself with gesture drawing, suddenly it kind of clicked, and I'm having so much more fun with them. And really just kind of trying to understand how the physicality of a pose works. So you can see what I did here is I fixed the angle of the leg, then I erased a bunch of things so that I can come back in here and let's see, chest is angled there, and just kind of get the proper proportions in here. And that's the thing with gesture drawing, it's not a finished drawing. You're not aiming for perfection in the first go. It is a learning drawing. So if you have to undo, if you have to, well, technically don't undo. Undoing is actually bad for learning. Because the problem with undoing, so for example, I could have just hit undo and kind of gotten back to an earlier position with this leg and redone it that way. But the problem with that is when you undo, you're wiping the mistake from your mind and starting fresh. But you don't learn that way. The way you learn is by analyzing, okay, what did I do wrong? Kind of like what I did here with the leg. And I can still see what I did wrong here. I can still see my mistake. And by seeing that, I can compare my old to my new and go, oh, that was the problem. I did it this way and now it's working. So don't feel like you have to get perfection right off the bat. That is not the point of gesture drawing. Gesture drawing is about learning. It's about figuring out how things flow, and it's not even the anatomical details, not even that. It's more just, how does the body flow? How does it function? How can you simplify the shapes that we see here to make an understandable figure? So get the line of the chest here, because this line here is throwing me off. It's looking like a perspective line instead of just a guideline that I drew. So we got the ribs here, come back. This is gonna sink in, not be outwards. You get the abs coming there. Now, one other thing I'm doing, and this is something I keep falling into, I'm trying to add detail, like muscular detail, with a gesture brush, which is never going to happen. The brush I'm using right now is basically made to be super soft and like you can't get detail out of it. If I try, it just kind of blurs everything together. I don't know how well it shows here, but well, actually, here's a good example. If I change the color to black and then here's some red, let's draw the red over the black. You can see how it mixes like that, which is really cool. It's kind of, it takes the color from one to the other. So even though I'm drawing in red right now, this is red. If I draw over the black, it just smudges that. But it just smudges all the lines together. It doesn't create any solid detail. Which means that as I'm trying to draw all this muscular detail, all it's doing is smudging things together. Which I just need to get into the habit of not doing that, and instead switching my brush if I want to do that. Or else I'm just gonna get very messy poses. Like here in the ribs, it's just this mess of smudges. So we can go in like that. Now let's actually come in here and let's fade that again. And come in with a sharper brush this time. So I've got a bunch of brushes here. Let's see, will this one work? My inking brushes or my detail brushes, I change all the time depending on the mood I'm in. Let's try this one. Make that a little smaller. So let's come in here and just work on anatomy a little bit. And I'll change the color just so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. So let's get that rib in there, those ribs. Now the ribs are an egg shape, kind of like that. You've got the sternum right there. Something like that. Comes down, and then we get the ribs down there. Now I'm not worrying about perfect anatomy here. That's not the goal here. The goal is just kind of understanding the form of the body. And actually the ribs come down a little lower here. There we go. And then they come back up here. So we've got the ribs there. Now if I was just focusing on skeletal structure, which is something you can do even with gesture drawing, you've got the ribs coming back there, then the spine comes back through here, and that goes into the hips. Now again, with clothed figures it's difficult to see this anatomical detail, but you've got the iliac crest right here. That's the edge of the hip bone, which wraps around body there and then ties into the spine here, into your tailbone. So if I wanted to, I could do all that kind of studying. So the pelvis comes down here, let's see, and right about there. So I could just do this very sketchy, and actually it should come back further out here, like that. So you can do bone studies like so. If that's the case, then you've got your femur going across here, which is going to be a little bit more shaped like so. So we could do all sorts of studies from gesture drawing. That's the kind of the cool thing about them, is once you have the gesture in there, at this point you can really expand it to whatever study you want. So we can do a bone study for the body here, or the top of the chest, which we can see a little bit more because he's now wearing a shirt. We can see there's the clavicle right here. That's the bone that attaches along with your shoulder blade. And I'm just going to finish the arm here. So the shoulder blade on the back of the body here, these two connect together, and that's where your arm actually connects, right here. So that comes in here. Then you get your arm bone there, connecting to two bones here, which is the ulna and the radius, which in this arm position will be flipped over each other. So let's see, here's elbow. The short break thing is right in the way. Short break, yeah, with this tool it gives you an indicator to take a break, which is very nice. It's always good to take a break when you're drawing, so that you don't get kind of stuck into bad patterns. In this case, since I'm streaming, I'm not going to take a break because that might be a little odd. Although I have seen some streamers take like 15-minute breaks mid-stream, which I guess I could technically do. It just seems a little odd. Take a break. I'm used to teaching classes, so it would be weird to take a break here. So we can build all this bone structure, or we can focus on musculature. So let's take a different color, and we can figure out how the lat muscle here kind of comes up there, connects down to the ribs, and even overlaps a little bit here. Connects to the arm there. It actually wraps around the arm. Same with the pecs here. The pecs come up and wrap up over top of the arm. That's why when you stretch your arm, your chest muscle gets pulled as well, because it's actually attached to the arm here. You've got your deltoid, which wraps around and over top of the arm itself. And then kind of down here. Bicep and tricep come up and over and attach to the lower arm bones there. And kind of come in through here, so you get this shape coming through. So I'm just simplifying it right here. So you've got your pec muscles right there, lats coming in right here. Then you've got like serratus muscles, which is these are the kind of sawbone or sawtooth muscles here. You see them on really fit people. That sits right there. So let's see, pec to wrap around the chest here, and then go up, being pulled up by the arm being raised. Deltoid sits over top. Arm comes in. There's the lat. Coming back down there. Oops. And that's creating that armpit right there. I must have some of those muscles then. We all have them somewhere, hiding. For the most part for me, they're just hiding and will never be seen ever again. It's a, kind of an amazing thing how every one of us, or pretty much, have all of these muscles and the same bone structure, but it leads to this huge variation in human anatomy where you get all sorts of different people of all sorts of different heights and weights and all of that kind of stuff. And it's just really fascinating to me how that all works together. Okay, so we've got that. Now you've got your oblique muscles that come in here, and this is what's kind of bunching up right there, because they'll wrap around the hip bone and then come up over top like so. So you get these folds of the obliques. Then you get the actual hip muscle right here. And then on this side, it's going to be the opposite, where we get the ribs there, and then the obliques are going to be stretched thin. So you get squash on one side, and then stretch on the other side. The abs connect right about here. They actually connect above the sternum, or the end of the sternum here, and then wrap down. So you can see we can start doing all of this studying, this musculature, bone studying, all of it from one pose and from one gesture. And it really is just taking that initial gesture and building off of it. And this is why I love gesture drawing, because you can just do a quick series of drawings. Like I've done how many here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in an hour. And if you just did a bunch of 30-second gesture drawings, just pump them out, do them super quick, or even a minute gesture drawings, do that for an hour. You'd have 60 drawings by the end of the hour. Now, at the end of that hour, pick one that you really love. So, for example, I could take, let's see, which one do I really like here? Well, this one, this got an appealing line of action. I could take this one and then just start refining it. And you don't have, if you had the image right next to you, you can, let's see, my first few drawings are really, really, really bad, but I've gone on, they keep getting better. Exactly. It's the whole warming up part. That's the best part of gesture drawing, is it gets those warm-ups out of the way, which is something I used to not do. I used to just go, okay, I want to draw something. I'd sit down and then try to draw a face or a character, and it was just like, ugh. It would just be ugly because you're not warmed up. So by warming up, it helps just get you into that drawing mode. And then, like I was saying before, then you can come in here and just really start refining the ones you like. So I could take this one here and actually start drawing over top of it. And I don't even have to add all the details. I could just make a drawing if I wanted to. And just start getting into there. So it gives you a good warm-up point, especially when you're new to drawing. Let me take a look at these here. So let me log in here. Okay. Ooh, nice. Let me put this full screen here so I can see. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, these are definitely a step up from the drawings you showed yesterday. These really have that form starting to come in there. For some reason, that first one doesn't want to load back up for me. There you go. Very nice. Yes, very, very good. You're starting to get that, the understanding of the form, the underlying structure in there. Yeah, they're definitely working much better. I don't know why that first one just doesn't want to load for me. Weird. I feel like practice, I will get there. You definitely will. Like, just the improvement from your last figure drawings to these ones, you're already getting there. Let's see. In terms of tips for these, other than just to keep practicing, one of the things that could help is focusing a little bit more on what's the term I'm looking for? Excuse me. Overlapping shapes. So what I mean by overlapping shapes, and this is something I really struggled with for a long time, is not being afraid to have one thing in front of another. And just kind of looking at these It seems, especially with the upper chest, you're running into that a little bit where things aren't really overlapping. So for example, everything kind of feels like it's straight on instead of rotated. And this tends to come from the human nature of we want to show everything. So for example, if I was to draw a rib cage here, I would want to draw the arm there and then the other one there, and nothing's overlapping each other. It's trying to keep clear silhouette. And we do this subconsciously, and it took me forever to realize, like, what's wrong with my drawings? Why do they feel so flat all the time? And then I started really paying attention. It's like, oh wait, I'm drawing everything stretched out and flattening things out instead of drawing overlapping shapes. So having like just a little bit of a shoulder there. So for example, on this drawing here, you're doing really well. It would just be a matter of, let's say you've got the chest here. The abs would be more like right there. So you can see here how you've got the chest, then the abs, then the hips, if you imagine it as 3 cylinders. Whereas you could imagine it a little bit more like this and overlap those shapes a little bit more. Like so. And then from there, the leg would sit under this. This one would come up over top. The head, let's see. And this, it all depends on the poses too. So I'd have to see the original images alongside of this because I have my own drawings, but my drawings aren't accurate, so I can't use those as a guide. But like just adding a little bit of overlap with the head here, or if you want the neck to show, like have really kind of just draw that neck out there and overlap the neck, the arms. There's quite a bit of an angle here, so to show the angle of the chest, really like use those deltoid muscles to show that angle difference. Oops, arm was coming up. So it's not a huge difference from what you have, but that's something I feel I really need to improve on, is not putting the head so close to the shoulders. I have the exact same problem. Even today, as I was drawing, and there were a few drawings where it's like I'm basically taking the chest here. So if you had the hips like so, and I'm drawing the head right there, it looks like my characters are just walking around without any shoulders or a neck. And it's just a matter of putting in that neck in there and then putting the head in. And the other thing, I always draw a head that touches the shoulders with no neck. Exactly, I do the same thing. And then the other problem that I tend to do, which is something I'm trying to pay attention to, is I tend to draw the head too far back. So I'll draw the head like back here. But that's not how our body works. Our spine, if you take our spine here, it kind of wraps back around to the hips and then forward. It has a forward lean to it for the neck, so that the head comes forward. It's almost in line with the ribs right there. But I always tend to draw it like way back here. So it looks like the character's just got their head too far back. And instead it's got a forward lean to it. The neck leans forward, not backwards and not straight up. That's the other thing you'll see is people draw the neck straight. And that's not the case. The neck doesn't go straight. It goes forward. So yeah, that's something I still struggle with too. And you'll notice it if you pay attention to the way I draw heads. You'll notice they tend to be a little scrunched up there. So yeah, overlapping poses, even like in the back leg here, like you could really take this and just kind of overlap that shape here, and still draw through it if you need to. But make sure you're overlapping and not, I don't want to say splitting it open, but it's like you're unwrapping it. I wish the left one would just load. It's my favorite. I'm not sure why it's not loading. It loaded initially, and I really liked it. That was my favorite as well. And I don't want to, well, I guess I could refresh here. Now, actually, just another note for you, and this is just general proportions. If ever you're having issues like figuring out where things should be, especially for arms are tricky. If you watch the elbow, if the elbow is down to the side of a character, it'll usually line up to the bottom of the ribs. So if you've got a character here, now my proportions are not going to be quite right on this basic shape, but let's say you have a character here, and again I drew the neck too short there. Anyway, if you've got a character here, from the shoulder to the elbow lines up with the bottom of the ribs here. So the upper arm is going to end here. The lower arm ends at the hips, and then the hands come down from there. So in this case of this pose here, for example, the elbow feels a little high. You can probably draw that a little bit longer here. Now this all depends on the angle of the pose. So for example, if my arm is here, my elbow is not down at my ribs, it's up here by the shoulder. It all depends on the angle of the arm. But what you can do to indicate that is do cross contour lines like so. So for example, if this arm was straight, let's imagine this is straight, I would line it up to about the lower rib there. And then if this lower arm was pointed upwards, I would add this contour line to it. So now suddenly that adds depth to your drawing. It feels like the upper arm is straight down, and then the other one is bent forward. Now vice versa, if it was the opposite, let's say, let's kind of draw it on the other side here. Let's say you had, and that does not show, another arm here, but the upper arm is tilted up and just kind of comes up here. Well, show those contour lines. Really show how far that's rotated upwards. And then you can take your lower arm, and let's say it's kind of angled up here. Then you can add contour lines to that, or basically what I'm trying to say is if something is angled towards the camera a little bit, try adding contour lines to it. It's really going to help sell the depth of your posing. Even for something like this, adding those contour lines to the arm here and then here will help to sell the directionality of the character. Same thing here. Especially, like you can see here how typically with human proportions, let's say you're going with an 8 head tall figure, so you split this into 8. Half of it will be the head and ribs and hips, and then the other half is legs. Our legs are half of our body height, pretty much. So if you look at that, And then look at this. Well, you've got here to here for the body, and then there for the leg. It looks disproportioned. It's not, though, because you're drawing it with perspective. You just want to show that. So as you're drawing here, really make sure you're showing those contour lines in your gesture drawings. And that's really going to help avoid that feeling of, oh, what's wrong with this pose? It looks weird, when it's not really weird. It's just, it's in perspective. We can't quite see it because with a lot of gesture drawing, there's not enough detail to see the depth, if that makes sense. So adding those lines in there will be helpful. So let me save these for you. And I want to try and refresh just so I can see that first one here again. If it'll load. Did my comments not save? Okay, phew. Let's try refreshing this and see if it'll load. But I hope those help. And I hope it makes sense. Oh, weird. It loaded the first time I loaded the page and then won't load anymore. Strange. Yeah, and if you have any other questions on this, definitely let me know. Let's see, I can actually see it here. Yeah, so for this, what I would recommend is just getting the squash and stretch feeling on your pose. So let me draw over with this. I won't be able to save this, unfortunately. So you've got your ribs here, and you've got your hips, and you've got this nice stretch on this side. But even in the gesture, try to push the compression on the other. So get a little bit more of compression in there. So you got stretch and squash, just like in animation. It helps sell that contrast in there. The other thing is watch your the straights of your gesture. So right now your gesture is feeling a little soft because you're getting this bend in the leg, and this is where having the clothes on can be tricky because it does look like there's a bend in the leg. And I talked about this a little bit, where you've got like a bend or a bulge there and a bulge there, so it looks like there's a bend, but in actuality that leg is straight. That leg is going to be super straight, like so, and then the other one's straight as well. And the thing that's making it feel bent, lower that leg a little bit, is the fact that the muscle attaches right up here, bulges down here, and then you get your knee, and then bulges again here. But the actual structure, the gesture, is straight. So be careful of moments like that. And these are hard to find and to really pinpoint a lot of the time. But as you're doing gesture drawings, think of the line of action. And oh, my camera died. I don't know how long ago I did that. Let's see. Why did it die? Did the battery die? Okay, so dang it, the battery died. I didn't charge it quite enough. Oh, and it's trying to come back. Oh no, and I don't have a spare webcam this time. Oh no. Let's see, I guess I could just hide that for now. Boop, it'll just be a disembodied voice today. But I hope that makes sense right there about the line of action, and thinking of that above and along with the gesture, because without it, poses will tend to feel, I don't want to say they're weak. The voice from the shadows, exactly. So by having that line of action, it just helps to strengthen the underlying gesture, line of action. It all kind of works together. Let's see. Are you working from a book? I just got Figure Drawing Design and Invention. I've got a few books that I work from. I'm not currently working from a book. The books that I use, I'm definitely gonna have to check out Figure Drawing Design and Invention. I haven't heard of that one before. But the ones I use, let me see if I can open them up here. I've got actual copies, and then I've got ones on my computer just when I'm away on my laptop, which is very nice to have. Let's see. The first one is Anatomy for Sculptors. I use this a lot when I do sculpting as well. I really love this book. I looked online, and it seems like it's very expensive in certain areas. But this one is great for learning anatomy and proportions, all sorts of different things. So you can see here, like I was talking before, how the elbow lines up with the bottom of the ribs, wrist lines up with the pelvis right there, or the femur, basically, just at the end of the pelvis, and then the hands after that, and how the neck juts forward. So this is a great book for learning anatomy in simplified forms. The other book I really like is Atlas of Human Anatomy for the Artist. So this is another really great anatomy book, which takes a lot of anatomy principles and breaks them down into simple terms like simple hinges, or let me see here. It breaks down all the different like bones and muscle groups, all of that stuff. But then here, it then, after breaking it down anatomically, it'll break it down artistically and just show like how to visualize it, like an egg with flattened sides, and what the ratios are between the head and the ribs, for example, and all of these different things, which I find very helpful in just kind of creating shorthand ideas for drawing. So again, like with the scapula here, ways of understanding how it wraps over top of the shoulders and all of that stuff, over the ribs. I recently bought Simplified Drawing for Animation, and I need to read that during the break. That's another great book, specifically for animation, because with animation you don't need to do all of this type of drawing. With animation, as long as you can get some good solid poses in there, even if they're really simplified. One of the drawings, I believe it comes from that book actually, is keyhole drawing, which is basically just drawing a character as if they're a keyhole, like that. So very simple character, and then you'd add the arms and the legs. And the nice thing with that is when you're planning animation, this creates a very simple character that you can use to plan out a shot without having to go into a ton of anatomical detail and all sorts of really complex theories. It's just a keyhole that you can then move around and quickly plan things. And that's the cool thing with drawing, is you can get really deep into bone structures and muscle structures and gesture and line of action, or you can keep it super simple. And it all kind of builds together and works together. Amazon had a Kindle version for The Natural Way to Draw, only $4.50, working on blind contours at the moment. Nice. I'm gonna have to look at that. Definitely worth. It would be worth taking a look into. I'm always on the lookout for new books and new resources. see, let's do one more pose here. That one, I'm gonna find a really good, interesting one. Well, I really like this one, but I'd like to see the detail a little bit more. The tutu's kind of in the way, but we can go with that. Hey, should be reading. Thank you so much for the follow. That's an awesome username, by the way. I didn't quite read it while you were chatting, but that is should be reading. That's how we should all be. Every day it's like, oh, I should be reading something today. I've got so many books I can't even show it because my webcam's dead. But so many books behind me that I have to start reading someday. Or finish reading. Let's see. So let's just do this gesture drawing here. Make sure I draw the head large enough. Now, one thing when you're drawing the head is if you're not sure of the proportions, just keep in mind that the head fits in a square. You've got the skull or the cranium that goes back here, and then the face comes down like so. Now, proportionally, the jawline is going to be right in the middle, like so. And then for the face, you can easily break it down into half of the head height is where the eyes are going to be. Just above that, and this is kind of, you just put a little bit above, that's the eyebrows. And then from the eyebrows to the chin, if you break that in half, that's the bottom of the nose. Break that in half, that's the bottom of the lips. So there you go. Now you've got the proportions of a face. So as long as you think of the square proportions, it kind of gives you a good idea of where things should be. And then once you have that in place, if you just think of a cube, then, oops, that line is way off. Then things also become easy to place because halfway down this side would be where the jaw would be. So you can start kind of imagining things like that. Let's see, are you working with time limit? There is a time limit on this pose. At this point, I'm like at 47 minutes per pose. But initially I had 30-second poses here. So these were 30 seconds, then a minute right over here, then 5 minutes, 10 minutes. This one was 10 minutes, I believe, or 20 minutes. I'm not sure. And now it's at a 50-minute pose. Although I don't know if I'm going to be doing it for 50 minutes. Yeah, the 30-second ones are killer. It took me a long time before I was even able to get anywhere close to finishing a 30-second pose. And for a long time, I thought it was impossible. I did not think it was actually possible to finish a 30-second drawing and get everything in that you needed. I would always like miss a leg or miss an arm or a foot. It was terrible. So many disembodied characters. So here I really want to push this line of action. So the line of action in this character kind of goes from the chest down into the leg here. So I really want to sell this directionality of the pose. And this is something like you can see initially I was drawing everything very straight. Then I looked at the pose and really look at it. You'll notice that the chest is back here, but then the hips are way over here. The legs make it look like it's, or if you look right here, it kind of looks, oh, it's centered. But the actual hips themselves are much more this way. Everything has this kind of tilt that way. So as I'm looking at my drawing here, I started noticing that, oh, I'm starting to keep everything really centered. So change it early on. And don't be afraid of changing. And you can always change later on as well. But I'm going to really try and focus on line of action first. Just to kind of show how important that is. So now we've got the leg here. Comes forward, the knee lines up. Let's see around there. Let's move my, oops, wrong key there. Let's move that head out of the way. And this is what's so nice about digital drawing. I was drawing on paper yesterday and the day before, and oh, I do a little doodle, like these head doodles, just to practice. And then when I got to my main pose, it was always in the way. I keep drawing things in the way, but at least with this, I can actually move it. Let's really focus on the depth of this here. This is one thing I do when I'm trying to figure out depth. Just do squiggles like this. And these squiggles, like you can see, it's just a matter of doing circles and just kind of this squiggly line here. But what this does is, as I'm doing it, I'm trying to visualize the object moving in depth. So for example, if this was an arm, suddenly we've got this. And it's got depth to it. Same thing here. We've got that, comes back here, and over top. So, hey Sin, hello! How's it going? So that really helps, at least for me, visualize the perspective of an object. And let's see, I'm drawing that leg a little too long right there. So I'm gonna kind of step away from it and kind of come to the shoulder here. And draw this. Now again, keeping in mind where the elbow lines up with the ribs, if I kind of just imagine that the arm came down right there, I can just draw this arc and go, oh, the elbow should be right about there. And then it lines up just below the chin. Like so. Let's see. Giving me points so I can catch up. Full of ice cream. Oh no, now I'm hungry. Oh, ice cream would be so good. The craving has kicked in. Okay, so we've got one arm there. Lats come up. So you can see I started with a very simple egg shape for the ribs, but that is not where I attach the arms. The arms come out much further. Again, kind of imagine them swoop down the ribs, so there. Something like that. There we go. Sorry about the off topic. What song was that? I'm not sure. My volume's a little low, so I couldn't hear the music quite well. Right now it's Mother 3. But let's see. Song before this, 151. Let's see. Oh no, did I lose my connection? The music just stopped, and I don't know why. Let's see. Why is the music stopped? Interesting. I don't know. Let me just refresh that. Maybe it's Mother 3 then? Maybe. There we go. Now the music's back. I think. Hopefully. First the camera died, and now my music's died. Oh. Do you paint or more like illustration, like comic book lines? I don't really draw at all. These streams are typically animation streams, but on Sunday I do these drawing streams where it's basically me learning how to draw. Because I've always wanted to learn how to draw and do 2D animation. I'm a CG 3D artist, so like with rigs and Maya and stuff like that. But I've always wanted to do 2D. So I figured instead of just saying I want to do it and never actually doing anything about it, I would take time on Sundays and just stream my learning process and share any tips that I learned in case those would help anyone else. Especially if anyone else wants to start learning drawing, hopefully give them ways of avoiding the pitfalls that I've fallen into. And yeah, so a lot of this is gesture drawing. Sometimes I'll do anatomy practice, but it all really depends on what happens during the week. And oftentimes there's always something that comes up that gets in the way, and I'm not able to practice during the week as much as I'd like. So Sunday becomes my just regular practice in terms of like gesture studies and stuff like that. Whereas ideally I would like to be able to show more tips and tricks and oh, you can do this and this is how you do that kind of stuff. Doesn't quite get there though. The head has a much steeper angle there. I love to draw, but I don't think I ever want to do 2D. 2D is tough, definitely. My brother does some 2D animation, and it's tricky, definitely tricky. But with that said, the things you can do in 2D, it's just so cool because you're not limited to a rig. If you want to animate Goliath from Gargoyles, for example, you don't have to try and find a rig or try to modify something or find the right prop or anything like that. You just draw it and you've got it, and that's it. And it's just so cool in that sense. There's so many animations that my brother has done where it's just like, oh, I feel like animating this today, and then he just does it. And for me, like, if I want to do that, yeah, 2D is witchcraft. I know, it's so awesome and terrible at the same time. But just for me, for example, if I want to animate a specific type of shot with a specific character, if I want to do it in Maya, it would mean having to mod a rig, create some props, create a whole bunch of assets and things like that, which can be very time consuming. And by the end, I haven't done any animation. I've just done a lot of like menial work. Not that it's menial, but when it's not for the final, or it's just for a little quick test, you're not putting a ton of amazing work in there, and the hours required to make it really good. I was so amazed by the lecture in ANO3 by Eric Goldberg. Yeah, exactly. That lecture is so fun. He just draws whatever. He needs something, he just puts it there. Really cool. One of my favorite lectures. Let's see, I think I've got the basics down here. There we go. So let's see. Pixar's library of pre-built stuff must be huge. Yeah. Most studios have a huge library of pre-built stuff. Just for doing quick tests and for training. And then when they start a new movie, they've got teams just dedicated to building even more assets. It's so cool. I feel like this arm's just a little long. So the nice thing with drawing on the computer is if I do find it's a little long, I can always just reshape it like this. And this is one of those things where I used to not like doing this. Transforming and reshaping things. But then I started watching a lot of professionals working, including my brother, and just watching their workflow, and I would say 90% of them all transform and edit things using transform tools in the drawing programs. And it's basically, it saves time and it works. When you're first initially learning, it might not be the best thing to do because you're kind of, I don't want to say handicapping yourself, but allowing the tool to do work that you should be learning to do from the beginning. But as you get more practice, just you've done a pose and you've got to redo an arm because you got it just slightly off. Just feel free to transform it. It's not a bad thing. Let's see. I think it keeps the proportion so close between drawings. Yeah, that's one thing with drawing 2D animation that I haven't done yet. My waist is too tall here. But I have a feeling that when I start doing it, I'm going to run into issues of keeping the proportions in place. I have a feeling my drawings are gonna get bigger and smaller, and it's just gonna be very strange. Just like this song. Let's see. I'm waiting for the day when a big company shares a bunch of feature quality stuff. They did do that on Unreal. Unreal Engine. I forget which, Paragon, I believe it was. Just shared a bunch of their assets from their game that you can use in Unreal, which is really nice and really cool. Especially if you're learning Unreal Engine, it's a great way to actually get some resources to learn and that are production quality. This song is really weird. Let's see. Imagine working with the rigs from Coco. Oh, those rigs are so cool. I got to see them in action a little bit, and they are so fun to work with. I didn't get to actually work with one, but oh man, are they cool. Okay, enough little fiddling here. Let's actually take this, erase faintly, and let's come back in here with a different brush. Okay. And make sure that my color is correct. Okay, there you go. Make this a little bit bigger. Ta-da! So at this point, it's really just coming through and not so much inking. Inking the drawing would be coming through and just making sure I've got nice clean lines everywhere. I'm not... I don't really care for inking in this process here. Instead, what I'm trying to do is do more studies. So for example, here on the neck, how the neck comes down and then it hits the collarbone here. And I'm trying to look at these areas and see how all the overlapping shapes work. So here, this is the trapezius muscle right there. Coming back, you've got the clavicle, the collarbone right here, which then comes into, and actually let me undo this because I'm drawing on the old one that I did. It needs to be lower here. And then that comes into the deltoid here. And you can see how the deltoid has a little bit of a bump right here. It comes in, and then we get this little bump right here. So I'm looking for details like that and trying to think what is causing that to happen. In this case, that bump is the same on this side right here. You can see it. Oops. There you go, undo. Right here. And this is basically where the deltoid attaches to the clavicle and the scapula in the back, your shoulder blade. And that divot right there is the actual bone. So the muscle attaches down to the bone here and then pops up and around. So you get this kind of shape right there. It's actually coming in and connecting right into that point. And that's a very important point to look at. But it's a point that doesn't always show up. Oftentimes it'll actually either be a divot like this, typically on people who are very thin or very fit, or it's going to be a little bit of a bump, again typically on very thin people. So you'll actually see the bony nub with the muscle attaching to it here instead of being the muscle attaching to a little divot here. So you can just imagine if your muscles are bigger, they're going to come in and attach into that point, compared to if they're small, that point's going to stick out. So very important little area to look at right there. Kind of clean that up a little bit. Okay, so we've got the clavicle here. Now if you watch the neck is a very interesting thing because it's not just a cylinder. You get the base cylinder shape, which is pretty small, but then you've got muscle that attaches to the collarbone on either side. So you can actually see it right here. It attaches at the base of the skull and then wraps around and attaches to the collarbone right there. Like that. And you have these two muscles right here. And then in the center, then you get the jaw coming out. And you'll notice that the jaw doesn't come up just in a straight line, it goes out. When you actually analyze the neck and really watch the shape it creates, the neck, a lot of people tend to draw the neck like this because everything tapers as it goes up. Things get thinner as they go up. We see that with towers, like with little antennas on top. We see that with a lot of things. They taper to the top. Trees, same thing. And automatically, that's what we kind of go with the neck. That's not the case. The neck is kind of the opposite. It actually gets thicker the higher you go. So the neck is actually shaped like that. Well, technically more, it's got a forward lean to it. So it's actually like that, thicker at the top. And the reason being, you've got your vocal cords right in here. And then it attaches to your jaw right there. You've got your tongue in your mouth. The muscles come down right here. So you're gonna have a thicker neck right near the top. So that's a very important detail to look for in your drawing. Are you tapering the neck, or are you actually drawing it with the right proportions? So you've got that muscle right there and then right here. And then if you actually look, the chin is similar. The chin doesn't just create a straight line into the neck again. There's this kind of underlying area that's in shadow right here. That is very important to pay attention to, or else your chin will never look right when you're drawing it. You want to make sure you get that triangular section right in there. Now again, we've got the traps coming in here, and like so. So that's the muscle that attaches to the back of the neck, right at the back of the base of the skull here. And then they come down and then along the back. So, and you don't have to go all this detail. This is just me kind of jabbering. But this is what I love about gesture drawings, is you can do this. You could either just ink the drawing. So if I wanted to, I could easily just go, okay, I know that I've got the body here. I can just simplify it down. I don't have to add a ton of detail. I know where the muscular structures are. So something like that. And you can see how I still have 22 minutes left on your drawing. I might not do the full 22, we'll see. But like you can see, I'm just creating these simple shapes. But these simple shapes, you'll notice that I didn't just go and do that, or just fill it in. I made these very specific straight lines here. And I could even do another one here, and then down there. And the reason for that is because I understand some of the underlying structure here. So for example, the ribs end right about here, which means that we'll have the, I just mentioned them earlier, the muscles that wrap around here. So you have the lats right there. And then you have the... Oh, now it's going to bother me, especially since I just named them earlier. I've got ulna stuck in my head. Well, anyway, you've got muscles that wrap around the body here. And then to your abs right here. So this kind of represents that muscle coming right here. Now, your hip bone right here has muscles and fat pad that attach to it right at the top here. And this creates a bunching effect right here because that character is bending a little bit on that side. Then from there, you get muscles coming down and attaching to the femur bone right here. This is the leg bone, which is going to have a little dimple right there where the muscles attach into. So that creates this next plane right there. And then from there, you get into the actual glutes, the leg muscle right there, or the butt muscle and leg muscle right here. So all of these shapes create these forms that you can simplify down into something like that. This straight. Let's see, I think you would really love the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. It really goes into the science of drawing and what part of the brain you use. I definitely have to look at that one. I've heard about it before, but I've never picked it up. So we've got Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. I'm going to have to save this chat here because then there were the other book suggestions that were mentioned earlier, which I definitely have to check out. So we've got this here, which then goes into the leg. So again, when you're drawing the simplified form of the leg, you could easily just draw a straight line here. But the leg isn't a straight line. It's got different shapes, different forms that overlap each other. And you can see it right here on her leg, for example. You really see this kind of impression right there. And this right there is part of, on your leg, you've got the main mass of muscle here. But then you've got a secondary mass that sits over top of it, right here. And this gives the leg a very distinct shape. So, for example, instead of just a cylinder, like so, you can start off as a cylinder, but it is not just a simple cylinder like so. Instead, you can start with a cylinder and then add in this extra mass right here, like so. And what that does is it creates this silhouette on the leg, right in there, that then tapers off before it gets to the knee. And then the knee, if you want to create, again, it's the knee is not a cylinder, but you can kind of imagine it like a piece of toast. Like if you've ever had white bread, kind of that's kind of the shape you can visualize the knee being a little bit. It's this muscle kind of folding up there, and then you get into the actual knee, which is basically a block. But that right there is that extra muscle just from the underside. So we want to make sure we're paying attention to things like that. The overlapping shape of the knee here. The knee, we don't just get the the thigh muscle that then just sticks straight onto the calf. The calf muscle actually comes up higher and attaches behind the thigh, and we get this little connection right there. So here we really want to make sure we can see that the calf muscle wraps around behind this, that comes up over here. But these are three separate things. You've got the thigh, the calf, and then the actual knee connection right there. The knee isn't just this bony plate. Well, technically that's the knee, but when you're drawing the knee, there's a lot more to it than just a little bony nub on the top. And this all is subjective in terms of, are you doing something cartoony? Are you doing something more detailed? All of it will change. So for example, if you're doing like Adventure Time characters, they're basically just bean bodies with tubes for arms and legs. Oops, a little short there. So just tubes and then little wiggly arms. Well, you don't have to know exactly where every bone and all the musculature is. Who cares? That's not going to matter. But by having that understanding, you'll at least know, okay, their legs should attach in this way versus another way. It gives you that structure. And again, depending on your drawing style, you don't need to know any of this. I know artists who don't know any musculature information. Like, they just draw what they feel looks good. And they're awesome artists. Like, they're way better than I'll ever be without needing to know any of that. Knowing musculature doesn't make you a good artist. Drawing does. So, above all, just draw. That's really what's going to get you to be a good artist. For me personally, what I've found is that by understanding these shapes and these forms, it just kind of helps me be able to understand and then create things from my imagination a little bit more easily that don't just look like a mess of lines. So a good example of this is in the legs. If ever you pay attention to the legs have a beautiful flow to them. So for example, the thigh here, if you look at the front of it, now let me clear out those drawings there. If you look at the way it flows, the front of the thigh, the line that it creates, flows directly into the calf muscle. And you create this beautiful line of action right here into the calf muscle. Like that. Now you'll notice there's a bulge here. Well, the reason there's a bulge is the bone actually comes down here, but what we're seeing is the muscle on the other side coming out and over. But we get this beautiful line and this flow through the pose. The same thing happens in the front of the leg. And do I have a pose here that kind of shows? Well, let's go with this one. If you watch, but draw what? I always want to draw, but the thing I want are too advanced for me, and I can't stand drawing apples and cans and stuff. Draw cartoons and draw whatever you want, and that's the thing I'm kind of struggling with right now too. Is I want to draw characters, I want to draw people and cartoons, I want to do 2D animations, but I'm not quite good enough where it works. But take some of your favorite artists and try to replicate their styles. For example, for me, like, I'll try to draw Adventure Time styles and characters in that kind of that look, and I find that's kind of helpful. So for example, for me, in some 2D drawings or some pencil drawings I had done recently. So I've got an old webcam here that I'm going to use. Let's see. So, oops. Okay, so there you go. There's some drawings I had done just on scrap paper. And what I was doing, let's line that up, was I was just looking at other artists and trying to see how they drew eyes, how they drew faces. And for example, here, like that's a Princess Bubblegum right there. And I was just looking at different artists and going, okay, I love the way they draw that character. How do they draw that? Now, would I ever post this online for like a reel or something like that? No, because I'm basically copying someone else's, or not copying, but studying someone else's drawing. But I'm learning from it. So look at a pic I like and try to reproduce. Yeah, try to reproduce and try to understand why they do the things they do. It's kind of like gesture drawing. With gesture drawing, you're trying to understand, okay, how is the anatomy working? What's the line of action? What's the feeling? Like, what creates this feeling of life in a pose? When you're doing the same thing with an actual artist's drawing, you're doing the same thing. What is it that makes their drawing so appealing? Why do I like it so much? And you're trying to study it and reproduce it. Not reproduce it so that you can then go, oh, look what I made. This is mine now. Not at all. It's trying to find out what makes it so good so that you can then create something from it that's new and original. I hope that makes sense. So, just in terms of the leg, before I forget here, if you watch the leg, the musculature of the leg here, you've got the muscle right here, like I was talking about before, that comes down. And if you watch the line that gets created between that and the knee, you create this line right here, which then flows directly into the line of the leg, like so. The actual bone of the leg, because the bone of the lower leg isn't straight, but you get this connection right in here, this flowing line right through that then adds to the pose. So look for lines like that when you're studying your anatomy. So like again here, how the front of the leg goes into the calf back here on this side. Also, drawing animals is a great place to start because it's really great for getting proportions and angles correct. Yeah, exactly. Animals are a little bit more forgiving because as humans, we're basically trained from birth to look at other humans and figure out what's wrong with them or what is like not quite right. With animals, is a little bit more forgiving in that sense. So like we could keep going here. I'm not doing the feet on purpose here because I want to focus on the larger structures. The leg comes up above here, so you can see how the leg doesn't just end early, but it also doesn't go all the way to the butt. It has a very definite end right here, which is because it connects to the iliac crest right there, and then wraps down to around the femur, and then back down to the pelvis. So we've got all that. Let's see, we've got about 6 minutes left. Hey, I might actually get the full pose here. We're not gonna draw everything, but we'll see what we can get. So for the arm, we've got the deltoid that wraps around over the arm here. The pec muscle that comes up underneath that. And then the pec muscle actually comes down here as well. Now let's clean that up just a little bit more. About there. So there. Let's see. Ooh, new sync sketch. Let me take a look at this. Nice. Are these, did you draw these? Nope. Let's see. Here's a couple of animals I did a few years back that are really not great. Oh, they look awesome from what I can see. That's awesome. Really good. I love how you got the shading on the nose. I feel like I was able to get a fairly appealing look to them. Oh, definitely. Really nice. Yeah, overall, like, my only comment for you would be, let's see, basically on the underlying structure. So, it's basically little things like trying to make it so that we can feel the forms underneath, which for a lot of it you have. So, for example, I can really feel the form of the mouth here, of the chin, that round shape there. But for the brows, for example, like really feeling that bony structure right here, that then tapers off into the cranium area. Oop, there you go. My drawings were a little laggy there. So just getting that bony structure underneath, and this is actually something like when you're doing gesture drawing to look out for. So, for example, this is actually perfect since we're on the arm here. If you look at the arm, we see two very distinct bony structures. The first is the end of the upper arm right here, which is, you can kind of simplify down to a simple dowel, like so. That's the bone coming down and ending here. And that's right there. Now, actually, let's push it out just a little bit more here. Now, just after that is the actual elbow, which the elbow is the end of the ulna. So the ulna wraps around this bone right here, out back, and it's this kind of blocky shape right here, which then comes forward to the wrist. There's a very big bone here that comes through and then around. And that creates the actual elbow bone. So we've got these two bony structures from two separate bones. And knowing, I'm always happy to give free points. If anyone has questions or want me to take a look at something, I'm happy to take a look at it. But by looking at these points here, oh, and take care, Sin. Have a great night. By looking at these bone structures, and you see them everywhere, like the other arm, you can see it right there. You can see it on the, for example, the kneecap. That's an easy one to find. The collarbone, right there. By implementing those structures, you can get a better sense of what's the word I'm looking for here? Of not shape, of solidity to your poses. It's going to make your poses and your drawings, and this is something that's especially true when you're doing sculpting, is going to make things feel more solid, because we're going to see where things attach. So kind of come up here, and then we've got the actual muscle coming up here. The wrist is another bony structure because it's basically just bone at this point. And then the hand is 90% bone. But let's kind of get that in there. Let's clean up my lines here. I'm getting a little sloppy with the lines. So we've got that. Let's clean up the inner part here. But I've kind of looked at this underlying structure, and this is going to give me that stability in my pose, that structure. And then this wraps around here. like so. But without these, if I had just created, and my proportions are a little weird there, but if I just drawn this without those and just made it soft, there's no structure here. I need these hard points to really show what's happening. So in your the leopard or jaguar sketches, it's just that kind of like showing the hard points, showing, for example, the collarbone, those sharp lines where there's a bony structure underneath. And it's amazing how much that can push something to the next level. It's the same thing like with even the chest here. Like let's say this, if I was just drawing the pec muscles, the pec muscles aren't just a solid mass here. They attach to the sternum right here. So if I make sure to show the sternum and then attach the muscles there and create this shape coming off of that sternum, suddenly I've got mass and this feeling of depth and shape to this character. Now our pecs are not shaped like this with the sternum right there, but this was just as an example. It adds that depth by making sure that we're keeping in mind that bony structure that doesn't change. It's the same thing with here, right there, like we were talking about before, how that bony section right there on the shoulders, it's either going to be a dimple or a bump based on the anatomy, but it's going to be there. It's not just going to be a round shoulder here. So I hope that helps. And it looks like we're just about out of time here, actually. So I might actually have to get going because I've got some projects to work on tonight. But hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully it made sense. We didn't get too many drawings in. Next time I'd love to just fill a page with drawings. But yeah, I hope this made sense. Again, apologies that my camera died partway through the stream. I'm not sure why it did. The battery should have worked, but maybe I just didn't charge it long enough. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you do have other questions or want demos for future streams, definitely feel free to... oh, how big is my paper? That's actually a good question. My canvas by default is, let's see, in pixels, 18,667 by 10,500, which is basically 17.5 by 31.1. The reason I have this ratio is it's 1920 by 1080 ratio, but I just like using a really big canvas. That way I can zoom in without losing any details and without things getting pixelated. And what brush and size is that? My brush sizes, it all depends on the brush. Right now my brush size is 25 pixels. I think it's pixels. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong brush. 12 right there. And the brushes I have are a collection of ones I've downloaded from Clip Studio. So for example, these measurement brushes, which I really like. And then some custom ones that I've made. And here's another one I got from Clip Studio that I downloaded. Very nice inking brushes and pencil brushes. Yeah, so if you do have questions, feel free to join the Discord, which you can find a link to down below under the video. And always feel free to ask questions in there if you have any. But for now, I will call it here. Thank you so much for jumping in and hanging out. I really appreciate it. and hopefully I'll see you in some future streams. So until then, take care, best of luck, and hope you have an awesome week. Bye. Bye bye.